started. There we go. The September edition of Tuesday Tea at 10 with Russ. We hope you all have your tea. I am going to pop off the camera. Oh, Dr. Jaffe, you're muted.
I'm now unmuted.
There you go. All right, I'm popping off the camera. Everybody, please enjoy this session with Dr. Jaffe. Ask your questions. I'm recording, so I'll send this to Travis when you're finished, and it'll be edited, and you'll be able to review it at your leisure.
Indeed. Hi there.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. How's by you and family?
Real good, real good. Everybody's happy.
Good. And you guys went, was it camping over the weekend or something?
No, not me. Not me.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
somebody else. It's a good weekend for camping.
Yeah, that.
We have squash. This year is the year of squash in our permaculture biodynamic garden. So we have crookneck squash. You've seen those yellow squash. We have round squash and flat squash. We have squash that look like cucumbers, except they're yellow. And then we have something called a delicato squash, which I've never grown before. And delicato are delicate. You basically split them, take the seeds out, stuff them, and bake them. And they typically mature at around 20 pounds.
Oh, geez.
This is family size. Now it has no commercial value because the skin is so thin that you do not remove the skin, because that's where the nutrition is. And you just split it, you take the seeds out, you stuff it with whatever you want, you bake it, and you just cut it up and eat it. And then tomorrow it's good as an afternoon snack, even at room temperature or cold. Needless to say, there are only so many 20-pound squash that two old men, Daniel and Rush, who inhabit this property, can eat. And he has his children, and I have friends, and then we bring them to people who like squash. And almost everyone says this is the most delicious squash we've ever had, but it's also the biggest squash we've ever had. And how many people does this feed? Well, as many as you have, actually. And I don't know about next year, because next year we're going to try and do more melons. Because I like melons. I like little watermelons and cantaloupe, and there's some exotic melons like Galia that, again, not very commercial, but they're really delicious. And we have a challenge, and I don't know how we're going to solve it, but our challenge is called the raccoons.
Yeah.
Yes, because we have raccoons. Now, we have an 8-foot wire fence all the way around the garden, and there's a lot to eat on the outside of that. But needless to say, a raccoon can climb a building if it wants. Okay, they are very dexterous, shall I say. So at 2 times at night, the raccoons come up, the family of raccoons. So you have a male and a female, and usually some young ones. One morning, Daniel takes me out, and there is a mother raccoon in the trap with 2 baby raccoons. And in the other trap is another little baby raccoon, like the cousin.
Wow.
So I said, Daniel, what are we going to do? Because I don't think they can. I know they can't get out, but he knows how to get them out without hurting them. It looked like they were asleep. They didn't move until he opened it so that they could. And then the mother took the babies out, looked at the other trap, but didn't really care much about that one, although Daniel, of course, let it go. And so sometimes the show, this is the nature show at the R&D Center in Vienna where I live, sometimes the nature show is just astounding. And then you realize how some of these critters who look like a decent size can actually get through a space that you wouldn't believe how small a little deer or a fox. Oh, if I may indulge you in a story. This is on Walrus Island in Alaska. And if you can ever get with the family at a certain age, go to Alaska. There are 4 or 5 climatic zones, and you can do them in 2 to 3 weeks very comfortably. You fly into Anchorage and you go and watch the glaciers calve. Then you go to Walrus Island, where you have to make a reservation. You're there with a guide. And the only thing on the top of the island, which is where you are up on the mesa, is a fennec fox. They're not big, but they're very smart, and they stalk. And down below are 2,000 to 3,000 walruses. So you're watching the walruses be walrus. That's why it's called Walrus Island. But what happened is the fennec fox starts to stalk my daughter, Anna. And my children know how to track. So Anna counter-stalked the fox. And I have a photograph of a fox and a girl looking at each other from a distance of a few inches, just looking with interest at each other. There is no evidence of aggression on either side. Clearly, Anna not going to harm the fox, but the fox didn't take offense at being counter-stalked. And I thought, and by the way, the naturalist, the guide who was with us as a government employee, it's a government island, he had never seen that. I said, how many people my daughter's age do you know who learned from Tom Brown and John Young how to track? He said, none. I said, well, that's why this was the first time you ever saw it. But, so that's the second zone. That's the second zone. The third zone is called Katmai. Katmai is where there is a small waterfall where the bears, they are bears, they are brown bears, and they let the salmon kind of jump into their mouth. I'm sure you've seen photos of this. Professional photographers take, okay. So we go there, Katmai. We're there for a day or so. And there is a lot of signs. And the signs say, do not take pictures of the bears. All right, it's very clear. Bears they want to sign an informed consent before you take their picture. So we're out on a spit. This is my son, Sky, his friend, Andrew, my daughter, Anna, and her friend, Sarah, and I, the five of us and some other tourists. For whatever reason, Sky takes out his camera and takes a picture of a bear who's about 100 yards away. It's a big bear, and the bear stands up, turns around like, don't take my picture, and goes back to being a bear. For whatever reason, Sky took another picture. The bear turned around and looked like, and then you see the bear go into the rushes, and then you see these tall grasses things, and you can see the bear is coming towards my son. Now, Sky knows what to do. He is now hunkered down inside a piece of driftwood, a very large piece of driftwood, and he is doing his best to disappear. But do you know the bears smell very, very well? Okay. So now I have a challenge, and this is, for a moment, it really was a challenge for a moment. What if that bear comes out of the rushes and goes towards my son? I'm supposed to go in between the two of them and put my hands up. And if my hands are taller than the bear will go away. But if the bear is taller than me, I'm toast. But at least I saved Sky. I didn't have to do it. I'm glad to tell you the bear continued to the other side of the spit and then ate some salmon. And what would it have been? Someone from, the Park Service, a Park Service ranger comes running over. He says, you were so lucky. He's now talking to Sky, not to me. You were so lucky. Don't you see the signs that say, don't take pictures of the bears? Sky said, well, I thought I could get away with it. The guy said, do you know that bears not only have very good hearing, they also smell very well? Now, second story. This is a Tom Brown story. So my son goes on a vision quest with Tom Brown and a group of other youngsters. It's not a formal, it's an informal vision quest, but he's on a vision quest. And his goal is to go out and find something to eat. And he finds a blueberry bush, and it's delicious. And he's eating blueberries. And then he sees a rustling on the other side of the bush. And there are 3 baby bears also eating blueberries. And then he kind of notices something called mama. Needless to say, Sky is fortunately downwind from them. He stops. He just quiets down and does his abdominal breathing and does his best to be invisible. At some point, the bears are done eating the blueberries or they go on to another bush. He goes back, and there was a night share. So you have dinner, and then you sit around a fire, and everybody shares. And they tell, I saw a rock today, and it talked to me. Okay, great. We get around to Sky, and Sky starts to tell what happened with the bears and the blueberries. It was the first time I ever saw Tom Brown's face. The blood drained out of his face. And he looked at Sky and said, Sky, do you know how fortunate you were? And Sky only said, well, bears are my totem. I don't think they're here to eat me. And I thought, ooh, this kid has chutzpah, he's got something. But we need to put some boundaries. He's still a very sensitive and very talented young man, but he's a little more prudent, I'm glad to tell you. Sky was always the kind of youngster who wanted in. You want a hug? He wants in. You want to jump off a building? I'm in. I said, Sky, I'm really glad you like hugs. I think it's good for boys and girls to hug and men and women to hug. But really, you have to be careful when it's things like jump off the cliff. He says, but Dad, I want to belong. I said, you belong to the universe. You belong to mom and dad. You belong to yourself. You don't belong to anybody else. He thought about that for a day or two, and he came back and he said, oh, Dad, thanks. Every once in a while, they listen.
Yeah.
But as you know, Brian, because you have a wonderful family, young people need attention, of course, but they're like clams. When they're open, they're open. And when you have those moments, God, make use of them. And when they're closed, don't try to open them.
Yeah.
You'll irritate them.
Yep. We're learning.
See? Hi, Ed.
Hi, Doc.
So any questions? Because I can keep telling stories, but any questions? I hope the stories are interesting. As you guys know, I've had an academic life, I've had a professional life, and that's been fine. But I have had a personal life. And I was somebody who grew up with his head in a book. I was a city kid. And because of children, and because we chose to live in the woods, and we wanted the kids to be, shall I say, comfortable, and we wanted them to be safe. We wanted them to be able to go out in the woods and know where the poison ivy was, but where the jewelweed was, what that sound means, and get away or go towards it. Fortunately, before they became famous, we met John Young from Wilderness Awareness. We met Tom Brown from Tracker School. They came to our home for over a decade so that 12 and a half kids in New Jersey could love the woods. And they brought with them Ingwe. They brought with them an elder. His name was Ingwe. In Akamba, which is a Kenyan tribe, in Akamba, Ingwe means the man who slept with a leopard that didn't eat him. And the reason, I kid you not, and the reason he got an Akamba name was he went out as an 18-year-old, slept on a rock ledge, and woke up with a leopard sleeping next to him that didn't eat him. So he got inducted into the Akamba tribe. He's a white Kenyan. He's actually the nephew of Lord Baden-Powell from founding the Boy Scouts. And at one point I even said, Ingwe, you're Baden-Powell's nephew. Why didn't you do deep ecology for the Boy Scouts? He said, Lord Baden was interested in merit badges, and I was interested in ecology. And I think that's true. I really think, I think there's a lot of good things and some other problems with the Boy Scout movement, but I think it's really designed for achievement, not for what I would call deep experience. Anyway, this is really true. If you travel with my children in any wilderness in the world, they can make you a debris hut to keep you dry and safe and warm. They can show you where the drinkable water is. And if there's a funny sound in the woods, they can tell you what tree to climb and how high. No, this is very important because my kids go to places where, you know, you might just need to know those things.
Sure.
And then this is again, personal story. My daughter spent 3 months with her godfather. She's in Dharamsala with the Dalai Lama. Then she's going to come back to Delhi and she's going to continue her gap year. All fine. There was only one thing that I asked my daughter to not do, and that was don't go to Ladakh. Now, Ladakh is where Pakistan, China, and India come together. And if you stay on the road, and I mean like on the road, you get 10 yards off the road. If you are a Western person and young, chances of being kidnapped are very high. And then they ransom and they send you a part of their body and a photograph of the date of, I mean, this is cruel, but they do it. It's a business. It's the way it is. So needless to say, my daughter has photos of herself on the Chinese side, on the Pakistan side, on the Indian side at Ladakh, and she came back fine. And I realized if I tell my daughter, Anna, this is the thing I don't want you to do, she'll do it. I should have told her to go to Ladakh and then maybe she wouldn't have. Right. So no, that's okay. How do kids differentiate without a little bit of rebellion? And we want a little bit of rebellion, but not too much.
Yeah.
I have my.
So go ahead.
No, I was going to say I'm waiting for some text. My one daughter graduated in May with an elementary education teaching job, um, what's going on. So about 2 weeks ago, she did get a job for
Oh, good.
secondary.
Oh, good.
Today's the first day, and they're actually in school from 8 to 12:45.
Oh, I see. Okay. And then is a second class from like 1 to 5? Or
No,
just, no,
no,
just a short day?
yeah, it's a short
Okay.
day, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday,
Okay.
Wednesday virtual.
Okay.
Uh, the kids had a choice of coming in or staying home, so her class is supposed to be live streamed. So I
But
don't
I
know how.
tell you, I'll tell you, that's about as good as I've heard, and people are
Yeah,
really trying to figure this stuff on the fly. But this notion of in the classroom and live stream are equivalent, nobody believes that.
no, she's
And
happy to
how
be
many
there.
kids, right? How many people can have class outside? Not many. How many
No,
people can have social distancing? Now we're going to teach in the lunchroom.
right.
There are many permutations, and I'm impressed with the people who are trying to figure this stuff out.
Right.
But when you don't learn the lessons of history and you don't anticipate what's going to happen, you're in the soup, and we're in the soup right now.
Yeah, so we'll see. But
Oh, we will see. And I just want to add, because it might be worth discussing amongst us, the social distancing is leading to social alienation. And we weren't that socially connected before. We were virtually connected better than ever. But, and those of you who have young adults or children, teenagers will know this. Teenagers, my children, will sit in a room with their friends
and text.
and they're texting messages back and forth and they don't
Oh,
speak.
absolutely.
And I thought, oh, they don't want the parents to eavesdrop. No, it's just the way they are. I actually said, Sky, you know how to talk. He says, yes, but among my friends, we just text. I said, well, what else do you do? Because starting with texting, you could end up with Tinder or something like that. I'm not a big fan of that, as you could imagine. But once
Yeah,
children have technology,
problem.
unless you put, and you can do this, I think, up to a certain age, unless you put certain constraints on it, you'd be surprised what kids very innocently can find. And then they say, gee, Dad, how long is your penis? And you think, you're 5. What are you asking me about that for?
Yeah.
Well, because I saw one, it looked so big that I was afraid of it. I said, well, it was fun. I tell them it's Photoshop. I'm telling them, I don't want them to discuss. Yes, I explain as soon as a child can comprehend that this is just a illusion, that this is just what you see on the screen, you can't believe. What you see with your own eyes, you may not be able to believe. That's another thing. But what you see on the screen, young person, don't believe. Oh, fine. So Daniel has a grandson. His daughter Nancy has a wonderful child named John. And John, when he comes here, he knows that the only thing Uncle Russ, want to do is sit with him and watch Netflix. Okay, so for a certain period of time, I sit and watch with him. At a certain period of time, the only thing he wanted to watch was a cartoon movie called Boss Baby. And he could almost recite Boss Baby. And for about a few months, he became like Boss Baby. And then Daniel, the grandfather, because the father died and the mother's doing a good job, but he needs a male influence. So Daniel says, John, he's very African, and the child cannot mistake what the grandfather is doing and saying. He's not withdrawing affection, but this kid knew, don't do that. And John looks back at the grandfather and says, but Grandpa, I'm only 5. In a few months, I'll be 6. And when I'm 6, and he did. So he indulged himself when he was 5, but when he was 6, he listened to his grandfather. And I was so impressed with that. I mean, Daniel is very West African, loving father, but very West African, very African. And me, I'm a Lithuanian, I'm a Litvak. I once asked Daniel if if he recommended that I behave towards my dear son Sky the way he behaves towards his boys. He looked at me and he said, but you're not African. He's right. I might have been able to emulate it, but first of all, my kids wouldn't have paid attention the way his kids do. And second of all, I really couldn't pull it off. So I have to do it by affection training. And I do think today the mental health issues, the isolation issues, the lack of communication issues, they are huge and they are growing.
Yeah.
And I am glad to see that people are concerned. They're doing studies, they're documenting that this stuff is going on. But honestly, I'm very concerned because the basics are not being followed through.
Right.
What a surprise, because we're not doing any of the basics on prevention, on health promotion, on evoking healing responses. How about on mood stability?
Mhm.
If you use this COVID-19 interval properly, it actually could be liberating. What the camera sees is important, but if I'm living my life on camera, it doesn't matter what shorts or long pants I'm wearing.
Right.
Hopefully I have a clean shirt on,
Yeah.
This is really true. You see my face, you see my hands, you hopefully see my shirt. This is a casual day. I hope it doesn't look like it, but this is a silk shirt. Because at one point, I kind of graduated from cotton to silk. I have silk sheets, I have silk shirts, but it's not, first of all, you don't get to see my bed unless I want you to, so that's not going to happen. The shirts are very casual, and I met these in Singapore, where it's hot and humid, but nobody sweats. I don't know how they do that, but they don't. I do actually now know. And so I got a couple, and they wear very well. And God bless Daniel, my friend and my chief of staff. He takes care of my physical world, and I take care of the metaphysical for both of us. That's a good deal if you can find it or work it out. Because, and I hope the other side is clear, Daniel has convinced me that we can't even have a cleaning service. Because the people who come for the cleaning service go home and talk to the people who are networked with MS-13 to keep it short. I couldn't believe it. Because what you couldn't comprehend doing, like if you say someone shot someone's mother in the face or their mother in the face, I'll tell you I can't comprehend that because my mother was my mother, and all Jewish mothers are crazy by definition. But no, you don't shoot them. You might think about it, but you don't do it. I think we are going to see the expression of mental stress and distress turn into violence.
Well, we're seeing it.
Sometimes when these cops are out of control, it's not that the person is really out of control. The system is out of control. Black and white justice is so different. This is an interview. I saw this interview. I think it was David Rubenstein, and he's talking to a very successful chairman CEO of a major bank who is Black. And Rubenstein says, well, what did you say to your son when he started to drive? And he said, well, I gave him the talk that every Black father gives to every Black son. Do not play music loud. Keep the windows up. If the cop comes, show him your driver's license and hands and say nothing. And Rubenstein, you can see on his face, he's a little surprised at this because this guy makes as much as Rubenstein. Rubenstein says, I didn't have to say that to my son. The guy looks back at him and said, your son is white. He's also Jewish. But Jews can blend in. Black and brown people are not Caucasian. But I have met people who really are African, but for whatever reason, they're very light-skinned. And I have met people who are very swarthy, but they're not, Latin or African. What a strange time that I'm going to judge you, or the quality of healthcare you get is based on the zip code and your socioeconomic demographics and how much money you make. That's true in America. That's not true in most of the world, but that's still true in America. And I do think at some point in the next decade, if not sooner, we're going to have to go to some kind of universal coverage. So now the administrative overhead is 3% rather than 33%. Hi, Daniel. Anything's available. Yeah. So we're going to have to go to 3% overhead. DOD is 3% overhead. VA is 3% overhead. Every big system in the world is 3% overhead. 3% is fine. In America, it's 33% for the private carriers.
Wow.
That fat could be used to speed the transition. You could use that money because it actually harms. It does not improve health. You could use that money to invest in speeding a transition to primary, proactive, preventive protocols and practices. that generate health, that evoke healing responses, that save lives and money and reduce suffering. It's hard to vote against that. Unless you're a lobbyist for, I make money on sickness, everyone chronic, ill, much profit. Sign off.
Well,
The Borg.
well, expanding on that, Doc, I know Brian and I, have spoken a few times about how to structure financially practice, a holistic functional practice. I'm a member of the Functional Forum and a bunch of different groups, and everybody kind of has a different approach. Some people, take insurance. That's very difficult to do, to spend an hour with somebody. Some people just take fee for service each time someone comes, and then other people have a monthly model or a package model. So we always talk clinically, but financially, what have you seen, and what do you think is the best model for that?
Well, I do think there are a few models. I think it somewhat depends on where you are. If you're on Fifth Avenue or Park Avenue in Manhattan, it's a little different than
Right.
Wichita. But here's my suggestion, and this is something that people have put into practice, and it's somewhat individualized, but you start with the following. I am here to pay it forward and serve. That's number one. Number two, I am here to provide value. Number three, I am here to reduce suffering, and therefore I am going to recommend what they need, not what they want. But in my waiting room, I'm going to pre-educate them. I'm going to have contact with them through an email list. I'm going to be available through Facebook or social media, where I'm going to put little personal vignettes with the emphasis on short and sweet. And, well, gosh, there is, shall I say, the concierge model, which is what I would refer to as the Fifth Avenue and Park Avenue model. And in that model, and it can work, but only in certain places, it's $10,000 for the first person. It's typically $15,000 to $17,000 for a couple. You get the doctor's cell phone. The doctor has 300 clients, not 2,000 clients. The doctor knows how to get you an early appointment for a scan or a thing. And there is a small, less than 1% of the population that is a candidate for that.
Okay.
Then let's go to the other extreme. Let's go to Albuquerque, or let's go to El Paso. You now have a few very wealthy people, but you really have a large mass of people who have time, but not money.
Right.
So now it's a group practice. You see 5 to 10 people at a time on a specific topic. Who has arthritis? Who has concern about heart? Who has concern about cancer? Who has concern about digestion? Who has concern about muscles? Who has concern about topics? And you just rotate through the topics. I know people who charge very little per person, but they have a room that can accommodate anywhere from 10 to 25. You don't want 50 for a variety of reasons. This is not EST. This is not, a seminar. You have to keep it small enough that people feel it's intimate. And if you keep the price down and you multiply by 10 or 15, it can actually work out. So that's two bookends of models. Then there's a model that I think the two of you are exploring, and I think it's an important one. And this is a model in which you say to them, this is a 6-month plan. And now I recommend that you sell a 6-month plan and you have them finance it through one of these companies that will instantly finance it or give them a credit card or whatever. Today, the interest rate is not onerous. It gives you the money up front, and it encourages them to participate because they prepaid. And I know too many people who are constantly starting again with a new doctor, and I'll bet you do too. And none of them are worth it, because the first visit, if you break even on the first visit, most doctors would be doing well. Why? You have to let them come in. You have to have a staff person. You can't do everything yourself. You have to talk to them. For me, it's 2 hours.
Right.
I don't do much, and it's got to be a complicated case, of course, but It takes me an hour before I've even listened properly and understood and mirrored back to them, and then another hour before they're done listening to me. So when I do that, it's an investment. I can tell you what people would charge, but you wouldn't have many clients. And the reason I do it the way I do it is I learned early on how to make a living in biomedicine and science without ever sending a bill, because that allowed me to tell people what I thought they needed to hear in the clearest and most gentle way possible. At the same time, I did not want to bias myself. And if you pay me, you could bias me. What if you come to me and your payment is emotional? You're in tears and I'm empathetic and compassionate. That could buy me. I actually had someone come and it really touched my heart, and I had to send her to someone else because I couldn't be objective and she didn't need me to be subjective. But she did see someone else who I think helped her over time.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm networked as you are to the few who we network with. For example, there are a mere handful of board-certified psychiatrists in the greater Washington, D.C. area who never write a prescription and always do lifestyle. And we know each other. And if necessary, we, shall I say, defend each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because the best offense is a good defense. Quick story. When I had my license in Maryland, I have only New York and California left, but at one point I was licensed in a bunch of places. And I get a friendly request to come to a meeting of the Maryland Medical and Chirurgical Society. Okay. Now I teach for them because the best way to prevent someone from misunderstanding what you do is to volunteer to teach for them what you think doctors need, and then be very polite with lots of references and don't sell, just inform and inspire. So I, of course, park in the back because that's where the faculty parks. I walk in the back. The medical board is there. They're playing pinochle. That's what they do before the meeting. The chairman looks at me and says, Russ, are you teaching tonight? I said, no, I'm on your schedule tonight. He turned to the other members and he said, well, we have one less item on tonight's agenda, right? And they all said yes, and I left. The best defense sometimes is a good offense. Sometimes the best offense is a good defense. Now, anything else? I don't want to dominate this conversation with personal anecdotes, but I hope they are relevant on the question of how do you do a practice? Let me add one more dimension. Telemedicine is here to stay. It was 9% before COVID. It's now 20+% and rising. Zoom is HIPAA compliant. There are Ring Central embed Zoom. There are other competitors. Pick the one you like. In general, I do like Zoom because I know a doctor who made it so simple that even doctors could use it and made it HIPAA compliant intrinsically. So you can do telemedicine over HIPAA compliant environs. I personally recommend a mix. So it's not 100% telemedicine, but it's certainly a big fraction. And then there are times when I think you need to see the person. You might even need to touch the person.
Sure.
Because there's only so much you can do on telemedicine. And there actually is a lot you can do, but it's a different practice art. I think, and we are doing this with those who want it, we coach doctors today on how to communicate as effectively through Zoom as they communicate in the office. Because I think that's here to stay.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, yeah.
The group model,
Right.
that you mentioned, is difficult in these times also because.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. I have helped people switch from a group in the office
To a Zoom group.
to group by Zoom.
Yeah.
From the group experience and participation data that we are getting, it's almost equivalent. You don't have more dropouts. You don't have more people leaving early, but you do have to be a bit more kinetic. You got to wave something. A little show and tell helps. Having two voices helps, preferably one female. There are little things. When I did radio, But when I did radio, the first rule, I go to the station and it has a manager and he's very professional. And I say, hi, I'm here and I'm going to talk about making people healthy. He says, do you know what dead air is? No. He says, it's called silence on radio. And the reason it's called dead air is because if you do that, you'll be dead on the radio. Oh, there should always be sound? He says, yes. If you want to shut up, have music, but make sure there is no dead air. At the time, I didn't think that was such a big deal. But now when I do podcasts and radio, I might ring a gong. I might play some music. But no dead air. So it's a different practice style. And I think most people are just trying to transition from this is what I did here to this is what I'm going to do there. And I'm telling you, no.
Okay.
Hey, Dr. Jaffe.
Yes.
One of our customers writes in and says that they're seeing a lot of heart issues go on these days. Everything from, heart issues, heart palpitations, due to anxiety and divorce and, other events, traumatic events that are happening. Do you have any thoughts or any advice that we can offer this customer?
Absolutely. The best advice I can offer, and I'll have to explain this for just a minute, but the best advice I can offer is the current edition of our ebook on COVID risk reduction and how to be inhospitable to viruses. But now let me address the question, because it really is one of the questions of our time. Why would we be seeing so many more cardiac irritabilities? Because we have too much adrenaline and too little serotonin. What if people practiced abdominal breathing 5 minutes twice a day? What if people actually used dichromatic green lights? What if people actually took salt and soda baths? What if people actually did a relaxation response or active meditation? Now you have much less in the way of what I would call imbalances of sympathetic, that means adrenaline and noradrenaline, and parasympathetic, which means serotonin and acetylcholine and glycine. And part of the reason that we give choline citrate along with the magnesium is because the magnesium soothes what calcium activates. So let's say before COVID-19, you were a typical American with a relative excess of calcium and an absolute deficiency of magnesium. And now you get a little anxious. Now the calcium causes the adrenaline to cause more irritability. Irritability in the heart, irritability in the nervous system, irritability in the digestive tract, irritability in your mood, irritability pervasive through the body. So that's what we're seeing. And it's an uncontrolled experiment. It's going on, and there is a solution. And the solution is use stress, not distress. Distress leads to stress-related illnesses. I think that's what the question is really about. And we're seeing people who are really stressed out, and I think legitimately. Although part of the issue, and a major, from my point of view, part of the issue, is today, you don't quite know what to be afraid of, and you therefore don't quite know what to do to reduce your hospitality. That's why I come back to the ebook, and we're going to do a third edition, which is post-COVID syndrome, and why you can and should recover, but you must do it by nature, nurture, and wholeness, physiology, before pharmacology, etc. So the sum and substance is that having started in cardiovascular illness, and I think avoiding, reversing, and rehabilitating cardiac and cardiovascular risks, stroke risk, atherosclerosis risk, peripheral vascular, coronary risks, all of that is built into the PERC Integrative Health Academy training. All of that is built into evoking human healing responses as we recommend. And to be very specific, I think we're seeing the tip of an iceberg. I think this is going to get worse before it gets better in terms of heart, mood, sleep, digestion, and related issues. I think we're going to see more liver and kidney and spleen issues. I think we're going to begin to see more endothelial dysfunction issues. I've given one keynote, and over the next X months, I'll be giving several keynotes on endothelial health and how to maintain it in the 21st century, when one of the most critical places that is under assault right now is the lining between the flowing blood and the vessel wall, and that's the endothelial environment. So I'm glad you asked the question. I think generally the answer is, well, prescribe this and prescribe that, and I'm not recommending that. I am recommending our epigenetic approach to rebalancing neurochemicals, hormones, immune defense and repair, digestion, detoxification, all as part of the joy of living the alkaline way.
Dr. Jaffe, I had a question on your recent flyer with the kids and the energized double zinc.
Right.
How much zinc, I'm worrying about anemia. How much zinc
Understand.
would you, how long would you have them on it before you cut, be on it for so many weeks and stop?
Well, that's a very important question, Brian. And I would just, before I give the formal answer, I will just mention that coercium dihydrate and soluble OPC are the best zinc ionophores going, and you don't need hydroxychloroquine. Now, moving on. It turns out, for a variety of reasons, and I can go into if you want, but for a variety of reasons today, people need a lot more zinc. And we have zinc in a number of our products. There's some zinc in the Lifeguard, there's some zinc here and there, and then we have double zinc and zinc lozenges. However, nature, fortunately, and Harry Henkin taught me this, nature, fortunately, gives us solutions. What I say is, you take as much zinc as you can under these situations. What does that mean? For a child, that could be 25 to 50 milligrams a day. For an adult, that could be 200 milligrams a day. Total zinc. Total zinc. Why? Because a combination of zinc deficiency and zinc wasting today is almost epidemic. And what do you do to keep them safe and to make sure you do no harm? You say to them, there is a very particular, a rather unique form of queasiness that if you happen to have a little more zinc than you need, and I mean that, just a little more zinc than you need, you don't tell them exactly what that is, because then you're programming them. You tell them there is a unique kind of queasiness. This is different than any other kind of upset in your tummy or in your intestines you've ever had. If you have that, stop the zinc and call me, or stop the zinc and email me. So I have been impressed at how much zinc deficiency and how much zinc loss wasting at the time people start can occur. And the sooner you correct that, the better. Now, on a maintenance basis, most youngsters need 25 milligrams a day. Most adults need 75 milligrams a day. But there is a wide variance depending on what the stress is, the quality of their water, air, and food, the quality of the home life, etc., relationships. Fortunately, zinc is self-limited, water-soluble, and not toxic as long as you know that when you get that queasiness, you just stop for now. Then, and a parallel, but I think related issue, I would use PERC Anemia Guard with anyone who is on zinc for more than a month. And that means I would use PERC Anemia Guard for a lot of reasons, but I would use PERC Anemia Guard with anyone who you would consider either a zinc waster or a magnesium waster. Because if you waste zinc and magnesium, guess what? You waste other minerals too, including iron. So most people, when I say I cook with a cast iron wok or I cook in a cast iron grill, they say, aren't you worried about iron? And I explain to them, if I'm low on iron, my vitamin C will help the iron come in and keep it reduced to ferrous so my body can regulate it. If I don't have enough vitamin C, well, then it's going to be ferric, stay in me, and cause hemochromatosis, hemosiderosis. I don't want that. So I take them, and then I say, because this is the part most people forget, and if you have enough iron, the vitamin C does not enhance your iron uptake, and the vitamin C protects the iron you have, because if it's in the ferrous double +2, not +3 state, it's water soluble, the kidney recognizes it, the brain recognizes it, it's regulated. It's the ferric form that we're not supposed to have. It's like a poison. And once, and I remember this very vividly, I was in my lawyer's office. He had been chief counsel at FDA, so I'm in the lawyer's office. And I say, Gene, you know, I really want to push ascorbate in regard to anemia and iron, and especially as the treatment for hemochromatosis and hemosiderosis. He said, of course. I said, what do you mean, of course? He says, don't you know that FDA actually has a monograph that the preferred treatment for hemochromatosis and hemosiderosis is vitamin C, is ascorbate? I said, really? How do I find that? He says, well, it's not easy, but I'll get it to you. And he did. And by the way, they pulled it off the website, so it's no longer there. You have to go to the Wayback Web if you want to get it, but it's there. And I was glad to know that this man, who had been an FDA person until he became a private attorney, was aware that vitamin C was actually pretty okay. And that when you did nature, nurture, and wholeness and physiology before pharmacology, you had better outcomes, fewer lawsuits, fewer deaths. Not bad.
I've got somebody now, and they're a high-stressed person, and we this was interesting. Her symptoms were severe anxiety. She can no longer drive a car. Okay. On her blood test, her ferritin is less than 1.
Oh, we need to talk about that. Keep going.
Yeah. So I put her on Hematin, 1 Hematin with 2/3 of a teaspoon of vitamin C and 2 painkillers.
Good. Okay.
She gets diarrhea.
Oh, okay. Keep going. I know why, but keep going.
Okay. And that was the dilemma. I put her on her 3 times a day. And I said, she goes, I always get diarrhea with iron pills. And I go, you won't get it with Hematin. Well, I had to figure it out.
No. She has enough enteropathy. She has enough atrophy of our digestive tract that when you put in the things she needs, you put in, say, the anemia guard, the good form of iron. You put in zinc. You put in magnesium, even with the choline citrate. I am pretty sure that we need to rehabilitate and reverse her enteropathy before she's going to be able to absorb much of the good stuff you're giving her. And what would I do with that? The LRA test, of course. The LRA test, of course, and plan. I would suggest that you and Jayshree both counsel her, because the more time she hears the same thing from other people who are just, confident but calm and supportive, the better. And now let's take this as a challenge. Let's take this as an opportunity. And the opportunity is how to deal with a patient who comes in and says, I'm anxious, and I'm so anxious, and I've been anxious for so long that I'm anxious about being anxious. That's what you're describing. Mm-hmm. I've met these people. Don Knotts was a comedian who did he made his career on this style. He was not this is on stage. You would say, hello, Don, and he would say, hello, and you see his fingers in the ceiling. Okay, that's the kind of person you're describing. Too much sympathetic overdrive, too little autonomic relaxation. So here are 1 or more of the following. First category, self-care. 1 or more of shiatsu, Thai massage, or doin. So shiatsu is acupressure. Thai massage is about stretching and, relaxing. And doin, D-O-I-N, doin, D-O-I-N, is self-acupressure. Now, you would think that an anxious person wouldn't take to self-acupressure, but it turns out they often do. And I present these as options. I recommend the second book of Doin by Lalong. You can get it online. Okay. When the person comes back, because I do a lot of tests with them, and then I have them do some tests with themselves, and then I have them come back and say, what was your experience? And if your experience was, I did what you asked me to do, but I really didn't like it, we move on to something they do like. I do not tell people to like stuff. I want them to do things they like, because guess what? They're more likely to do the things they like. Okay, so 1 or more of those, and if none of that works, then they can do Pilates, Traeger, or Feldenkrais, or in that Baniel. But that's in one category. Now, the next category, Herbert Benson's relaxation response, or Deepak Chopra's meta-human practice, or someone like that. Now, I happen to favor Robert Leichman and Active Meditation in the Western Tradition, published in the mid-70s. Some people find it almost enlightening. Some people don't. It's a book. If you're not a reader, I won't recommend it. But whether you talk about online video, or you talk about reading, or you talk about just going and practicing with a small group, they need a relaxation response. They haven't yet gotten to active meditation, although you could, when you read the active meditation, the Western tradition book, the first thing he says is, relax. And then he tells you how, and you have to practice that for a while until you reach certain endpoints and milestones, and then you can go deeper. Third, green dichromatic light. One of my favorites, learned from Bhante the monk. Green light goes to the retina, from the retina directly to the pineal. If you talk to the pineal gland of that client or anyone like that, the pineal is as jittery, shall I say, as the rest of them. The green calms the pineal. Then, if they will, you offer the sleep induction. Salt and soda bath, 5 minutes of abdominal breathing, active meditation for 15 minutes, maybe under the green light. Then you get out and towel off and kind of, brush your skin with the towel. Then you stretch. I stretch in bed, but then you stretch before sleep. So I then get into bed and stretch, but you stretch for 5 minutes, go to sleep. You'll fall asleep more easily, you'll get more restorative sleep, your hormone release at the critical REM cycle moment will be better, everything gets better. When she achieves restorative sleep, when she can self-soothe, one of the things we try to teach young people like children, how do you soothe yourself rather than needing mommy and daddy to soothe you? I did that better than mom. Mom was too willing to go and hug them. I said, I think it's important that they learn how to get up. I can still hug them, but I want them to know how to take care of themselves. And they can. Young people who are given an opportunity to learn how to self-soothe. In my case, again, this is all in hindsight, but in my case, my self-soothing was sucking my thumb with my bonky, with my little blanket that had some smell. Okay. Up to a certain age, that's fine. I was sucking my thumb, in second grade or something. At that point, there's some need for that child is not getting met. Yet children can be, and usually are, if you make it safe, if you make it fun, they'll usually tell you what's going on. I'm afraid that I can't fly. Oh, this is a real story. It's in a book called The Magic Years by Vera Freiling. A mother and father tell a 6-year-old child, tomorrow, we're going to fly to Europe. And the kid is wailing uncontrollably because he thinks his parents can flap their arms and fly. And he can't. Does he know what an airplane is? No. Did they explain to him that tomorrow, mommy, daddy, and you are going to go in a car, and then we're going to go to an airport, then we're going to go on a big thing called an airplane, and then we're going to fly? That's what they should have said. Kids are literal. They believe you. So be careful. People often say critical things to children that they hear and that affect them later. Becca, this is where she was really good. She did not let our children hear anyone's judgment or anyone's opinion about their behavior without her permission. And most of the time, the answer was, Mom and Dad will take care of it, which I happen to agree with. But very often children are told, Jewish children are told, you're a mazik. A mazik means you're a bad kid. They don't even know what a mazik is, but they know that that's bad and it's applied to them. If you're Italian, there's a different word, but every culture makes the mistake, in my opinion, they make the mistake of teaching children by harshness rather than by affection. And I will tell you that my daughter, Anna, at about the age of 4, she became Princess Anna, briefly. Her name was Pula, no longer Anna. And when you said, why is your name Pula? She said, because my name is Pula. Now, Pula is an Indian name. It means flower. But why did my kid pick that? Okay, so about 20 feet from where I am right now, at the front door of our house, my daughter, Anna, had a meltdown, a hissy fit, a tantrum. I put my arms around her because she was young enough at that point where I could put my arms around her and contain her, but not control her. And I just kept saying, as she flailed around inside my arms, I kept saying, Anna, I love you. This is unacceptable behavior. Anna, I love you. This is unacceptable behavior. She kept at it. She kept at it. She kept, and eventually she got tired, went to sleep, and never did it again. Now, I might have been just lucky, but I will tell you in hindsight, I think that was the affectionate, respectful way to deal with a child who's having a meltdown or a tantrum. And one of the things we did, which I think in hindsight was helpful, but very rarely is done today for social reasons, if our children were not welcome, we just didn't go. But one New Year's, I wanted to take Rebecca to Hay Adams, which is a nice hotel, and have them, serve us dinner. When the children went with us, and I called ahead to make sure this was okay with Hay Adams, but when the children went with us, they would be with us, probably on our lap or maybe in a high chair, and at some point they get tired. So Rebecca put the sheepskin under the piano because nobody's going to walk under the piano. Put Anna down under the piano. The musicians enjoyed it. We knew where the child was. We very rarely had babysitters. We never had to call to make sure the kids were okay and the babysitter hadn't done something. Rebecca did not like help. This is really true. Rebecca's answer to almost anything is, I'll take care of it. My answer to almost anything is, who do we call? She pointed out to me. Now it's really humorous to me. It's also true. But I will tell you, the first time she talked, as if I was the lord of the manor and she was the scullery, I wasn't happy, but it was true. So you don't know, sometimes you hear what you need, but not what you want. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're about at time.
Yeah.
And there's another, yes, sir. In a couple of minutes, I have another urgent request.
Right.
But thank you all. We'll do this again. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Brian. Everybody else, hi. Much love.
Bye, everyone.